Hey everybody.
Hi.
Hey, we're back after a couple weeks, 2 or 3 weeks being gone.
Yep.
One of those was Thanksgiving. And anyway, we want to talk to you a little bit today about a Christmas gift that you can give yourself. And what triggered this was we were talking to someone recently and heard about a young person that's going to their therapist, and there's some hurts and maybe some bitterness, resentment, I don't know what all, towards parents. And the therapist told this person, you don't need to forgive. I thought, wow, how sad, because forgiveness is a huge gift that we give to other people, we give to ourselves, really we give to the world when we give forgiveness, to keep the junk that comes in between us, keep that from working and doing more damage, more hurt to ourselves, to other people, and really putting things to rest, to bed, separating ourselves from that hurt and pain and moving on. We've dealt with this a lot in our ministry. We'll deal with it very regularly, and
we see people get really whole and healed when they forgive.
Just tremendous freedom in a lot of ways.
Sometimes it can just be one thing that they've held on to, and if they've kind of forgotten about it, but the Lord will remind them, and it'll change their life.
Yeah. When we don't forgive, we end up getting stuck in bitterness, in resentment, in
even hatred.
Yeah, hatred of other people, judgment, and we just end up pretty miserable when we live with unforgiveness and hold it. And especially for us who are Christians, if we've been forgiven and then we choose not to forgive others, that's really, I don't know if hypocritical is the right word, but it's really just self-focused and not being willing to give back to others what has been given to us, and that's what God asks us for. And so, again, we've seen this a lot. One of the stories that we tell a lot in our ministry, because we've been given permission to, is not a young man, actually a man in his 50s who had been sexually abused when he was young, and that followed him throughout his life. It messed up in his relationships. It made it hard for him to be free in a real intimacy, honest intimacy. Excuse me. And he lived with torment in his soul, and he didn't realize it was connected to the forgiveness until he was willing to forgive the perpetrator fully and freely from his heart, and it left. It left after probably about 40 years, and he was on his third marriage, and their marriage is doing well, and he's just free of that internal torment.
Yeah. And if you read in the Bible about this, God actually sends tormentors to us when we are not forgiving, because the unforgiveness, the consequences of the unforgiveness is so much greater than even sending the tormentors to bug us and make us miserable. And so God, as a God of mercy and love, sends the tormentors to us. I want to ask some of you, are you tormented? Are there things that you're holding on to, and do you feel like, oh, your life is just miserable? It could be that you are not forgiving. And it's not just forgiving for the violation or the thing that was done wrong, but it's for all the years of how that has influenced you and affected you and hurt you. And like this man, he had 3 failed marriages. He was on his 3rd marriage that was not doing well. And that's another consequence of not forgiving. It affects, you think it's only this one little part of your life, but it affects everything.
Yeah. And it kept him stuck, kept him from moving on into real freedom in relationship. And so that's why this is a gift, or one of the reasons why it's a gift to us. There's freedom that absolutely cannot be attained when we choose to hold on to anger, bitterness, hatred, whatever, of other people, and we refuse to forgive. And again, it's something that God requires of us who have been forgiven. It's one thing He requires, and that's why the Bible tells us in Matthew 18, He'll end up sending tormentors to us if we refuse to forgive as we have been forgiven. And He says, until we pay back the debt that we owe, and the debt that we owe is to forgive.
Yeah.
So He wants us to be with Him in this.
I just wanted to mention a couple more consequences of not forgiving. And it separates us from God. The very person that we need to help us put our lives in order, it literally cuts us off from Him. Mm-hmm. And I've seen the results when somebody, and you know, you don't well, I guess we'll talk about that later, the unforgiveness that we have against God.
Okay.
In a minute, we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
But also another consequence is it can, I think this is more just another comment I want to make about forgiveness, because sometimes we always think that forgiveness needs to happen with people that we're really angry at, or somebody that we hate, or somebody that we've been bitter towards. But I know of one man that we worked with many years ago who had been brutally raped, and just a lot of things that were going on in his home, and his mother was there and was loved him and cared for him, and he had forgiven the perpetrators.
Who were the mothers?
Oh, the stepfather's brothers.
Yeah.
He'd forgiven them. He'd forgiven his stepfather, but he'd never been totally free of the effects of this unforgiveness, and it had been wreaking havoc in his life. He also had failed marriages and anger and addictions and all kinds of things. But when we ministered to him, the Lord showed us again that memory. And you don't want to go back to that, but the Lord said, no, go back to that memory. And who he had not forgiven was his mother. And he goes, but I don't need to forgive her.
She didn't do it.
She's the only one that really loved me and cared about me. But she was so wounded in that whole scenario in their family as the wife of this man and all that was going on. She was in survival mode. And so she was unaware. She was unable to protect her child and even be aware of what was going on.
So she brought in the husband, the stepfather, and his brothers, not knowing who they really were and not being able to protect her son.
Yeah.
And that had a tremendous impact when she forgave the mother.
When he forgave the mother, everything changed. He ended up, even after that, the angerness left, the addiction stopped, and he even got a physical healing as a result of that.
Yeah,
that was just amazing.
Yeah.
The other thing that we face when we don't forgive is, do you want to do this one?
Well, I think I already talked about it. Just the lack of freedom because of all the stuff that you hold on. It keeps you from moving forward. I don't think I want to say any more about that.
Okay. The last little example I wanted to give was a pastor friend of ours many years ago told us this story while he was at a fun park, and he saw a young girl who was blind in one eye, and the Lord spoke to him and said, I want you to go pray for her and I want to heal her. And so he just kind of hesitated, and then pretty soon, their group was leaving, and he missed the opportunity. And so he said, oh, Lord, I'm so sorry. If you give me this opportunity again, I will take it and I'll go right up to her. Well, of course, and this is a huge, there's probably 1 million or 2 people in this fun park. And he runs into her again. And so he goes up to her and he starts talking to her about her eye, because you could see that she was blind. And he says, you know what? And he just says the whole thing like it was. He says, I just felt like God said he wanted to help you. He wants you to forgive. Because her brother, she goes, no. She goes, I can't forgive. I'm not going to do that. He threw this stick in my eye and it's deformed me and it's caused all this trouble in my life. I can't forgive it. And he kept talking to her about it and talking to her about it. And finally she says, all right. And he led her through a forgiveness prayer. Mm-hmm. She forgave her brother, even for all the years of not being able to see and what it caused in her appearance. And her eye was healed on the spot.
Yeah. So
sometimes unforgiveness can even hold illness or disease or damage in our bodies to us.
Yeah. And sometimes we need to forgive ourselves. And what that really is just fully joining with and receiving and believing and accepting the forgiveness that we ask for God and He gives to us.
Mm-hmm.
And that we say, I forgive myself, but it's really just joining with His forgiveness. And that's really critical too, because we've seen people that get stuck by that. They can forgive other people but cannot forgive themselves, and they still stay stuck in the torment and the misery.
And I can think of an example with a young lady in one of our single life workshops. She could forgive everybody for every horrible thing that they'd done in her life, but when we finally got to the place where you said you need to forgive yourself, and she goes, no, I will not.
It had to do with someone she had married, and it ended up, I think,
she
doing
married
some
the
really
wrong
bad
person,
things. Yeah.
and he ended up killing her baby.
Yeah.
And she says, and so she took all that responsibility on her. God did not put that on her. But she says, no, I will never forgive myself for that. And again, we had to sit there and talk with her. But once she did, it was like a huge transformation. You could just see it immediately.
Yeah.
And even in her relationships in her small group, it was beautiful.
Yeah. And the other thing that's a little bit different to talk about is sometimes we get mad at God. And we don't forgive God in the sense of saying, you were wrong, God, and I'm going to forgive you because you were bad or did something wrong. But what happens is we end up holding anger, bitterness, judgment, resentment against God. And to get free of that, we have to let go of those things and that we hold in our heart against God, and release Him from all that and let Him be God again in us, people that are following Him. So as we thought about Christmas, I thought, you can focus on a lot of different things. And what do you give to yourself? You can focus on gifts, focus on things that you like, you're excited about getting, presents, stuff like that. Even people, and all that is fine. But if we don't deal with the inside, some of these things, we can have all the other outside things and be empty and still be miserable. So we just want to really recommend this to you, that you take some time to ask the Lord if there are people that you need to forgive and go through that process.
Yes. So we bless you to do that in the name of Jesus. And we are leaving a little tool in the comments for you to do, one of our forgiveness tools.
Also, I got to tick on my throat, but tell them about Deeper Intimacy 2019.
Yeah. We did Deeper Intimacy, which was a 2-day workshop, 2019, last May, and it is now ready and available for you. New material, if you didn't go to that, which many people didn't, as an e-course. And you can get that on our website, and that's ready to go.
And our website is nothinghidden.com. So we want to wish you a Merry Christmas. Hopefully I have my voice back by then.
Merry Christmas to everyone.
Bye-bye.